Hey, Diane, when you... Okay. Grab my phone. Oh, I'm on? Yeah, okay. I'm not on here. Let me hit go live here. We're live. I think we're live on What's Up, and I think we're live on YouTube. All right, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Brennan, and where's the camera?
That camera in the corner.
All right, I just got to say something. I got to put a big disclaimer on this. I got suckered into doing this interview with the school board by Diane Plansky. I'm not prepared. This is going to go very bad. It's 11:50 a.m. on Saturday morning. I should be watching Channel 56 or Channel 38 and the cartoons, and I think Creature Double Feature was on at this time, and wrestling. So we're talking, King Kong Bundy and stuff like that, but no, we're doing this now. So I'm here to introduce Peter Plansky, who is running for the school board. This is intended to be a roundtable, but Jeff Larson was unavailable. There were a lot of questions. We were going to cancel it because Jeff couldn't be here, but there were a lot of questions that came through that we feel that needed to be asked. So, Peter, thank you for joining here this morning. So, right out of the gate, tell us a little bit about yourself and why the heck would you want to put yourself through running for the school board?
So I'll answer the easy part first. I've lived in Litchfield for 24 years. We moved here from Massachusetts. Don't hold that against me.
Yep.
Like many of us did. Why did I decide to run for school board? My kids went through the school system. We were fairly active at that point when our kids were there. Not as active as we could have been. We did what we could do around town, and mostly that was coaching, room mother, working around, volunteering for some of the stuff around town as we've become empty nesters. And based on what I've seen happening with the school, particularly from a financial perspective, I felt it was time to take a larger role. I opened my mouth at deliberative a couple years ago and said, maybe it's time that somebody who doesn't have a kid in school play a more active role on the school board. So I kind of called my own bluff and said, I'm gonna run for school board.
Well, that's commendable because a lot of people that talk about these things don't actually step up to the plate. So it's nice that you're stepping up to the plate here. So what are the top things that you personally think that you would bring to the school board?
Well, as a COO of a company, I have to work. I find some financial responsibility. I have to do a lot of team building with different departments, bring folks together, and I also learned that just because I'm the COO, I don't know everything. So when we were going to take upon an initiative, I bring all those folks together, particularly the folks on the front line who understand what's happening in the real world, not what folks in the ivory tower might believe is going on or what they feel should be going on. We build a consensus, we set a plan, set a goal, and we work towards that goal. But again, with input from the folks who are actually doing the job.
That's good. Thank you. So I do have a list of questions, and most of these questions were sourced from online or sent to me. So I'm going to rattle through them.
Okay.
If you could answer them briefly, I got about 10 questions here. That would be appreciated. And they're based on different topics, so we're going to jump around a little bit. So number one, the hot topic is always budgets. Last year we had that $1.5 million hiccup that kind of put us in the hole. This year it looks like, based on what we had from last year's warrant articles and this year's warrant articles, that the actual budget increase was about $2.1 million over 2022. So if you look at the warrant article from the 2022 warrant article, we were going for a budget of $23.7 million, and then this year we're looking at $25.9 million. That's straight from the town, the voting guide. And baked into that for this year are the LEA contracts, which is a significant more money. So tell us a little bit about the budgeting, the impacts that you potentially see of the default budget, and what your thoughts are.
So the operating budget this year basically includes 2 years' worth of both years of the teacher's contract, because that first year was added to the operating budget from 2022 that was voted upon. So there's about a $700,000 increase of the $2 million or so dollars. Within this year's operating budget, there's also $470,000 to finish the kitchen at the LMS, for the LMS project. So that's part of it. And I know there's a big mystery, and I've tried to get more information on how the default budget is arrived at. There are some things, for instance, energy costs. I think at the town level, the energy costs have to stay the same. The school budget, the school board feels that because, or the administration feels that because they have to be open a certain number of days a year, if there's any of those increases, they can bake those into the default budget as well. So it is a bit of a mystery. I haven't had a great opportunity to get a full understanding of how it works. As far as the difference between the operating budget and this year's default budget, again, half of that is the LMS piece. Something that we will probably get to is, what happens if the default budget passes? Yep. So I did reach out to Mr. Totten, who I think has been very cooperative and very easy to get information from. And I had asked him about some information on the fund balances over the last few years and asked him if he thought there would be a fund balance at the end of this year. And while he doesn't have a number for the fund balance at the end of this year, he does think there's going to be a fund balance. So there are 2 articles on the ballot this year, I think they're 3 and 4, to move some of that money into the trust funds, right? The maintenance fund and the capital planning fund, which I can't remember the names of them. That money could be used to offset, if the default passes, some of that money could be used to offset the difference. Same with I'm of the opinion that we pause the LMS kitchen if we had to save the teachers.
One thing that's interesting that I noticed in doing a little bit of research is, in the past, it always seemed that the default budget was higher than the proposed operating budget. And this year, it's flip-flopped the other way. Any reason for that? Do you know?
I think the reason for it is, again, the $470,000. I don't think there's any way to sort of hide that. And energy costs. We were supposed to get a lot of savings out of the solar array at LMS, and that didn't occur. And I think when that was presented at the deliberative a couple of years ago, they had $195,000 for the first year's payment as part of that warrant article. Well, the first year's payment was really $365,000. So they have to pay that, but they didn't get the savings, right? So they were, much like the federal government, saving money by not spending as much as they planned to. So they had to make up that difference too.
All right, let's switch gears to facilities. So what's your position on the land purchase, which is going to be looked at this year, and then the need for a new elementary school? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think if we have to have a new elementary school, I think the location is a great location. I think we should buy the land. I think we need to take another hard look at what do we need going forward. I mean, our enrollment is declining, even with development in town, and it's projected to continue to decline for the next several years. So do we need 3 schools? Is this something we can do to consolidate? Campbell was designed, in speaking with the fire chief the other day, initially for 800 kids. I'm told now that it's 600 kids because the SAU has taken some classrooms that were available in there. And Campbell was also designed to put an addition on for growth. So could we take and move K through 6 to LMS and put 7th and 8th in the high school and create a junior senior high school? I think it could be done. We need to do a bit of math. I think we need to get people who are willing to consider it, and with an effort to get to yes. What I would rather have is 2 full schools as opposed to 3 half-full schools. And I think if we build a new elementary school, based on projections, we could end up with 3 buildings.
That's an interesting thought. In my industry, I work for public works engineering for a public works engineering firm, and we do facility studies all the time for cities and governmental agencies across the United States. And that's one of the biggest things, is figuring out, what's the best use of dollars to support your facilities. And a lot of it involves consolidation of facilities, or even in some cases, expansion of facilities. So there's a lot of communities that will enter into true facility studies to not come up with the answer that you want to come up with, but really put every single option on the table to figure out what's best for the community. So I think that's a valid point. But in going back to the land purchase, so you said you're for the land purchase this year.
I am for the land purchase. Again, I think it would be a great spot for the school. And if the school doesn't go through for whatever reason, then perhaps it's something that conservation could purchase, or the town could purchase. We could put a park or something over there, and name it for Mrs. Riley's daughter, as well as that becomes a memorial park in her name. She was a dedicated teacher, and
Yep.
The original owner of the Pink House.
Pink House, you got that. Let's talk about communication. So over the past few years, the school board and the administration has taken some heat regarding communications and transparency. And then you add the $1.5 million snafu on top of that. It's like, oh God, it just keeps coming at us. Do you think there's like a transparency or communication issue? And if there is, how would you think you could improve it?
I think there is a very bad transparency issue with the school board. And I think there are a number of things that we can do. I mean, one is, when people come to speak at the school board, they actually get a chance to speak and they get a response. The selectmen do a much better job when people come and speak. Most of the other boards do too. They allow for a certain level of dialogue. Now, you can't get into a 45-minute conversation with somebody about something, but you go to the school board and a lot of times they don't respond. They don't necessarily acknowledge what you're saying. They just sort of look at you like, oh, okay. Nobody wants to say anything. That's part of it. I think they could do a better job when they present things, and I'll go back to the warrant article for the LMS project. They did put up their PowerPoint, and they showed the savings as how they were going to pay for this, but what they didn't really say was, they would hope people would infer it was, well, if we don't get these savings, there's another bucket of money over here we're going to have to come up with, folks.
Yep.
And it was and I toured the schools with the superintendent and the chair of the school board, and I told them this: you guys have to be more forthright with what the reality is. And I feel like everything is shaded. They give you just enough, and if you had, say, a 15-year-old boy, you were trying to find out what they were up to, where are you going? Out. You have to pull. It's way too difficult to pull information out of them. And that shouldn't be that way. They should present everything.
Yep.
Honestly.
That's a good way to put it. So I took a look at the LEA meeting that you had with Mr. Larson, and it was apparent that you've done your homework. You're pulling facts and figures out. You're referencing, talking to this person or that person. Seem to have a lot of in-depth knowledge. Talk a little bit about that. How long have you been looking at this or considering being involved? Because it doesn't seem like the information that you're pulling out of your back pocket or that's coming out of your mouth, you just learned yesterday.
No, I've been thinking about it for a while. Since last deliberative, we thought about it. But I've spoken to folks on the budget committee, folks on the selectmen, teachers, past and present. We've had them to our house and sat in our kitchen and talk about what they think some of the issues are with the schools. What is the reality as opposed to what is presented at some of the meetings, in particular with respect to grading, competencies and grading, and what the appetite is from the teachers on that. And it's different than what was presented just the other night at the school board.
You bring up a good point. In looking at the school board meetings, there's always talk about morale and staffing, and we had a bunch of folks provide questions about morale. Do you think there's a morale problem?
I think yes, short answer. Long answer is we've lost 80 teachers in the last 3 or 4 years, either to retirement, going to another district, or just getting out of education
How did
altogether.
you get the number 80? Like, where did the...
I think I got it from the LEA, actually. So the, how do I say this without throwing anybody under the bus? I believe there's a culture issue within the school district. And I said it at deliberative a couple of years ago. If you speak up as a teacher, and we saw it last year at deliberative where a teacher spoke up and was kind of shouted down a bit by the superintendent. Almost like, how dare she raise a concern? So the teachers don't feel comfortable speaking up. That's a problem. I know they did a recent survey. I don't know how many people took the survey. I'd like to try to get that information. Teachers don't want to take the survey because it's done via Google. Well, everybody's email is a Google email. They don't think they can be honest. There are issues too. One of the things, somebody mentioned to me, is that they don't feel they have support, either from administration or from the parents. And I think that's a problem, both of those things. I know that there's a coach who's leaving the high school, I think, who was kind of torn a new one by a parent, and nobody from the administration stood up to try to defend this person. And they should have. And the answer that I got was, well, I will eventually. Well, that doesn't help. This person's going to leave now. They coach 3 sports. They're a para. We have a shortage of paras. So parents need to understand, like I did when I was a kid, my parents always assumed I was wrong. Whatever happened at school, it was my fault. It wasn't the teacher's fault. And they started from a position of that. And I don't know that I ever convinced them of anything different.
I had the same problem. My mother would give me the little Italian hex. What
Yeah.
are you doing? Let's talk about competencies. I got to tell you, my kids went through this. I didn't know what the heck it was. I can't even describe formatives. I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't understand it. Tell me about competency-based grading. What your thoughts are on it.
I don't really fully understand it either. I know both of my kids went through it. I think it can be, it's kind of a nouveau thing, right? It's the latest, greatest philosophy.
Like, do you have to do your homework?
No, not really. Yeah, that's part of the problem, and we do a disservice to our kids. When they come out of high school, they're not prepared for college, because when you teach in college, the paper's due on Friday at end of day, which is midnight. And I can tell you truthfully, both of my kids submitted papers at 11:59 many, many times. Now it's like, nope, you don't have to. If you can do it. I think initially it started as it was optional, but if you did your homework, you could, and you didn't do well on the test, you could retake the test. Now you don't have to do your homework, and you can retake the test if need be. And with competencies, I think there's 4 areas of competencies. So if you do poorly on something, and you might have a teacher who says, this one project is the competency for this section. If you do poorly on it, it kills your whole grade. Class participation is not important. Your behavior in class is not important. It doesn't suit folks when they get a job. So I would like, it's required by the state, but I think we could have some sort of hybrid thing where homework counted, class participation counted, your quizzes counted, your tests counted, projects counted, everything counted, and you could weight it.
Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't understand it, so I just let my wife deal with it.
A lot of the teachers don't understand it, and I did the same thing. I was like, I got to go to work. I don't want to talk about that.
So let's talk about the kids. So some of the good things. So the schools are really about the kids and education, extracurricular activities, dealing with or becoming part of the community, and then really like preparing them to be adults. So go back to when your kids were in school. What was your kids' experience? What are the good things that they learned through this school system? and how it prepared them to be adults, and, how would we carry those types of things forward? Do we need to change anything?
Well, my kids graduated in 2008 and 2013, right? And I think they both had a fairly positive experience at Campbell High School. My kids are very different. One is was very outgoing. The other one is more subdued. They hung with two totally different sets of people, but it was positive. I think they had great teachers. Pat Keefe, who did the LEA thing the other night, he had both of my kids. Remembered them fondly, which I was appreciated and surprised, depending on which kid you're talking about. But I think they had a positive experience. I think it was a little bit different than it is now. I think things are a little more tense, and I think that goes because there's not a great relationship between the administration and the teachers, and you can feel that.
That's interesting. I echo the same things. My kids had a very good experience, and I thought that Campbell really did a good job to prepare my kids for college.
Mm-hmm.
And they went on now, and they're in their 20s, like your kids are, and they're becoming successful. But they had a good group of kids to hang out with, and so what are your feelings on like extracurricular activities and the importance of them?
Well, I think it's very important. I think it's important for the kids to have something. When we voted into high school, that was, I think, our first vote when we moved here. Having a high school in town helps build community, and all those extracurriculars do. Not just the sports, but if you went to the play this year, it was amazing to see all three schools work together. The folks that put all that time into it. I think the place was banged out every night. And it was a real sense of community. It was like all the stress of nobody talked about the $1.5 million at the play. Everybody was waving at the little kids from the GMS. And it was a real community building event.
It was great. I told my wife, I'm like, she dragged me to some plays in Boston, Phantom of the Opera, stuff like that. Plus, I'm 6'3", I'm sitting in a stupid chair like this. It was perfect there. It was like, it was incredible. Everything was incredible. Hopefully they continue to do that moving forward. Winding down now, what do you think the top priorities are for the school board for the coming years?
I think we have
What do you think needs to be tweaked or changed or could be improved?
I think we need to get our financial house in order, right? That's a big part of it. I also think we need to change the dynamic a little bit of the school board meetings. I think that oftentimes the superintendent runs the meeting as opposed to responds to questions. I think it needs to become a little bit more directed. The philosophy of the school needs to be more directed by the board. What we're trying to do going forward, and he should execute that. He needs to have feedback, absolutely. He certainly is much smarter with the educational piece, but it needs to be something that the entire community can get behind.
Let's see where we're at. So what do you think some of the top priorities are? I think I kind of went over that, but
yeah, I think our testing scores are declining. And I think the testing scores are declining because, in large measure, we don't hold the kids accountable, right? They don't have to study. They don't have to do the homework. You learn stuff. Most people can learn stuff by repetition, right? By exercising your brain. And if it's not important to the kid to do homework, they won't do the homework, and they won't have, kind of bake that knowledge into their head.
Winding down here, Peter, why should somebody vote for you? And do you have any, closing thoughts? What's driving you to do this, and why should somebody vote for you?
Well, in some measure, because I don't have a kid in the school, so I don't feel like I need to get, a model airplane club or a hockey team. Although there's a little bit of a hockey team, I'd like to see our own hockey team. But so I have no agenda. right? I just want to do what I think is best for the overall school district and the kids. And it also includes the teachers, right? We've got a lot of good teachers. We have had a lot of good teachers leave. I've heard rumors of more teachers planning to depart. So I have for lack of a better term, no loyalty to any one group. I just want to do what I think is best.
Yeah, I think that's, it's a good point. It's nice within town boards to have, I'll put it in air quotes, diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily diversity like we know diversity, but diversity in having people on the school board that don't have kids. Because you often see folks specifically on the school board that have kids, and then when their kids graduate, then they drop off the school board. So it's nice to have, with all boards in town, folks of different ages, folks of different views, all coming together. So I think that's a really good point. So I got a question from the audience. Are there benefits to consolidate to students? Are there benefits to consolidate to students? What does that mean?
I think I understand the question.
Okay.
So the benefit, if you could take the 7th and 8th grade and put them in the high school.
Oh, consolidating the schools.
Right,
Gotcha. Okay.
Those 7th and 8th graders would be availed of other classes, right? Maybe additional language classes or more advanced classes. And you would be able to have teachers who might just be teaching in the high school now be able to also teach 7th or 8th graders. So you'd be able to, I think, create more offerings. I mean, we have a problem with kids from LMS who are not going on to CHS, right? They're either going to private school or they're going, or the private school or parochial school, because there are not programs or classes for them offered because of the shrinking population. We need to work on getting the kids who live in Litchfield to stay in Litchfield and go to the schools. So how do we get to that point? We have to fix the culture at the schools so we can recruit teachers. The teacher community is small. So if somebody calls Mrs. Jones and says, geez, I'm going to take an interview in Litchfield. Well, Mrs. Jones may say, you don't want to come to work here because of this, this, and this. So that becomes part of the recruiting problem. But if we could offer more things at the high school, and we can't necessarily offer a class for 1 or 2 kids, but if we expand the population in the high school, maybe that class becomes 12 or 15 kids that would like to take that course.
It's kind of goofy with the school population going down as the town's population is actually growing. When my kids were in school, so my son graduated 2015. I can't remember exactly, but I thought there were 120 in his class, and now I'm hearing that there's some classes that are going to be in the 80s
Yes.
that are coming up.
I think next year's senior class is the last class that will be over 100 for like the next 8 or 10 years. So part of it is there's people like us, like Dan and I, who have lived here for 25 years. We're not leaving, so our house is not becoming available for somebody else to buy. Even with the townhouses in over off of Page Road, there was all of those townhouses, and I think there were 35 of them or something. They only had 11 kids join the school because people are coming here. They've moved up, especially after COVID. They could work anywhere, be remote, and they're already empty nesters. My own opinion is the condos over there by Darkole. I think you're going to see a lot of empty nesters living there who don't have kids. So there's an outside organization that does the projections, and I think the number is 0.7 kids for every new house.
Interesting. Yeah, it's just an interesting trend.
You wouldn't think so. It's illogical, right? You'd say, well, okay, we're building all these houses. There's going to be,
But then I look at my neighborhood, and when we all moved in, probably the same thing in your neighborhood, everybody has kids, and there's been very little turnover in the neighborhood. So
same where we live.
I get a question online here. So what about the supporting staff? Do you believe that that they are as important to the schools as, I'm assuming, like the teachers and the students? So paras are underpaid. at this district, and they're very important. So what do you think about the support staff?
I think the support staff obviously is very, very important, and I probably should include both when I speak. It's not just, it's everybody that works in the school, and I know there's a ton of open positions. I would say, without knowing anything of the market, I did look at some ads the other day, and the paras are underpaid. You can get a job at Dunkin' Donuts for $16 an hour, which is more than the paras are getting paid right now, and that's seems a little ridiculous in this day and age.
It does. Okay, I think we're winding down here. So, Peter, final thoughts.
I would ask everybody to go out and vote on next Tuesday, even though it's going to snow. I'd say it always happens, I guess.
Remember 4 or 5 years ago, we had 2 blizzards in a row where they were like 24-inch snowstorms, not the little 8-inch ones.
Right, and well, thank
People
goodness
went
for a little
boating
global warming.
with snowmobiles.
So, if I would ask for people to, so inclined, to please vote for me for school board. I think I can bring some value to the board and help the district move forward.
All right, appreciate it, Peter. Just some final thoughts here. So, Mr. Plansky was also on the John Latcha show.
I was on the John Latcha show last night, yep.
So that's going to be up on YouTube. And then you and Mr. Larson, so if you want to hear what Mr. Larson has to say, you and Mr. Larson did the LEA interview.
We did.
And that is also up on YouTube, and I think it's tagged on this page as well. So I think everybody should have enough information here to make an informed decision. And with that, I think I'll close it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay.
Give you a round of applause. We got a live studio audience. Thank you to LCTV, and we'll end the broadcast. 31 minutes, Peter. Not bad.
Not bad at all.
Diane was like 4 hours long.